This is the third in the Pecha Kucha format, and as you can see, my timing is not exactly right. Perhaps I needed to do a little bit more rehearsal or a little bit more practice. Every time I try to record these, I do get a little nervous, and so it's worthwhile to talk about communication apprehension in that context. And what's worth starting with is the fact that speaking in front of a group is a very common fear. In fact, it's one of the most common fears that people have. Everyone does have fears about something, but it doesn't mean it's the highest ranked fear. Yes, speaking before a group is more likely going to be cited as a fear, but it's not the thing that people are most afraid of. And when we talk about a fear of public speaking, we want to sort out between three different things. Glossophobia, a general fear of speaking. Public speaking anxiety, which is a particular fear around presentations. And communication apprehension, which is our anxiety or concerns around talking with others. Now, many cases, public speaking anxiety and communication apprehension are different from some other phobias. So if we're afraid of snakes or spiders or dogs, which should have come with a trigger warning, we can understand why people are afraid of those because they're actually lethal to us. Public speaking is not lethal generally. But what we fear with public speaking is ostracism. We fear rejection from a social group. We want to be part of a group. We want to be with a group. And every time we communicate, it might drive us away from that group. And when we are speaking in front of others, that's not natural to us. It makes us on the outside. And when we see ourselves on the outside, according to our book, we often see something very different. We're looking at a big room full of alpha predators. And to some extent, the top is what you see, and the bottom is what your brain sees, because your brain and your other systems treat all threats, be they social or physical, the same way. And what we want to make sure that we sort out is that public speaking anxiety is different from communication apprehension. Communication apprehension might be something you feel when you're out and you're trying to talk to that person and you're a little shy about it, but public speaking anxiety is particular about presentations and being in front of people. In ways we tend to deal with this public speaking anxiety and communication apprehension are through skills-based training, such as this course, or perhaps through immersion, in other words, exposing people to situations over and over again, or perhaps reframing and recontextualizing public speaking situations to make them seem less harmful. However, in many cases, we find that these things don't always work, and there's not simply a magic bullet that will make you less apprehensive about public speaking. And in the studies cited on the left, or the right, what we tended to find was that many things didn't work in all cases, and some things worked better for some than it did for others, and there was a strong placebo effect. And this is something that Aristotle would have told us as well when he talked about medicine and persuasion, that something that will work in one person's case may not work in another person's case. There are things that work better in general, which include things like immersion and skills training, but there's no guarantee that that will work for every single person in every context. So since not everything will work for everyone, you need to practice a lot of different varieties of things and a lot of different modes of delivery. So the same way you get to Carnegie Hall is the same way you become a better public speaker and give better speeches. There is no shortcut around just plain practicing. And in many cases, we don't practice. We tend to think practice is unfun, we feel silly doing it. Whenever we feel anxious about public speaking, when we have anxiety about it, we don't want to do it. It's easy to procrastinate and put things off that we would rather not do, rather than things we would rather do. And college students are very good at putting things off. So I'm going to give you this slide, and I want you to write down a number. And this number represents the number of hours you think the average student spends practicing all of their speeches, doing all of the work for all of their speeches in a semester. So go ahead, write it down. 5. The average student spends about 5 hours doing all the preparation for their speeches. That's gathering their materials, putting together their PowerPoints, doing their research, writing their outlines, everything. For 4 speeches, 5 hours in average. And when we think about how that time is broken down, we can see that a lot of students spend a lot of time doing certain things that are helpful and certain things that are not very helpful. So most students spend most of their time writing formal outlines or working on their delivery and visual aid creation. In many cases, this seems helpful, but what winds up happening is the average student out of 4 speeches spends 20 minutes, only 20 minutes or so per speech, dealing with the most important thing, which is delivery skills. The thing that will make your speeches better and, in fact, raise your grades according to the research is working on your delivery skills and practicing. And in many cases, we want to distinguish between practice and rehearsal. Now, for people who are in bands or in theater or dance will understand the difference. But for public speaking, we can think of practice as the thing where you're doing just words or just this or just a small piece, and rehearsals when you're putting it all together with an audience. Now, when we think about practice and rehearsal, it's not to say one is necessarily more valuable than the other. You might practice your words and decide you need to revise a few things. Then you put it all together and you decide you need to go back and revise some of your visual aids to match things you were practicing during delivery. You might practice just the rate of your speech and not worry about if all the research is right. Having that as a constant cycle, and especially doing parts of that cycle, that rehearsal part in front of an audience, will really enhance your speech. The most effective thing you can do to become a better public speaker is to speak in front of people. There is really no shortcut around it. But the more you do it, the more likely you are to feel better and feel more confident. I want to thank you for watching. Be sure to leave your comments in the RISE model below, and I will see you with a new format for the next lecture.